Have you ever wondered if the men we celebrate as the heroic founding fathers of America were really just politicians, soldiers, and philosophers? Or was there something else behind the scenes, guiding their actions, whispering in their ears, and shaping the destiny of an entire nation? History books tell us the United States was founded on liberty, equality, and the bold spirit of independence. But when we peel back the surface, another story begins to emerge, a story of hidden networks, secret oaths, and societies whose power thrived in the shadows. 17th and 18th century America, the colonial world, wasn't just about farms, merchants, and preachers. Beneath the dirt roads and candlelit towns lay a hidden web. This web connected men who believed they were part of something far greater than the colonies they lived in. Their lineage stretched back to Europe, to medieval guilds and mysterious brotherhoods that operated out of sight of kings and churches. When these settlers crossed the Atlantic, they didn't just bring their religion and their traditions. They brought their networks too. Why did secret societies find such fertile ground in the New World? Were they merely social clubs where merchants could strengthen business ties and politicians could share a drink? Or were they something more, a hidden council where decisions were made that would shape the birth of an entire nation? Imagine colonial Boston, Philadelphia, and New York. By day, they were noisy hubs of trade, markets filled with goods, and taverns echoing with arguments over taxes and the crown. But at night, a different kind of gathering took place. In certain homes and meeting halls, candlelight flickered behind shuttered windows. Inside, men sat in strict order. Symbols were carefully unfolded on parchment. Rituals were whispered. Oaths were sworn. To outsiders, these were fraternal meetings. But for those within, they were something far more binding. Some documents from that era survive today, letters, journals, even minutes from meetings, that suggest these lodges weren't only about charity or brotherhood. They were places where strategies were drawn up, alliances formed, and futures decided. While the colonies struggled against Britain, some of the most influential planning may not have happened in open assemblies or public squares, but behind closed doors, under the watch of societies sworn to secrecy. Skeptics often dismiss this as conspiracy. Yet consider this. Why do so many founding fathers' names appear in Masonic records? George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, Paul Revere. Were they all simply drawn by coincidence to the same brotherhood? Or was this network the glue that held together colonies that were otherwise deeply divided by region, class, and interest? Take the Boston Tea Party, for instance. In textbooks, it's described as a spontaneous act of rebellion, angry colonists dumping tea into the harbor to protest unfair taxation. But peel back the curtain and something fascinating appears. Many of the men involved were not just ordinary rebels. They were members of Masonic lodges, using secret gestures and symbolic clothing to recognize each other in the chaos. Was it truly a people's revolt? Or was it a carefully orchestrated display of defiance by men bound together by hidden oaths? This leads to a deeper, more unsettling question. Was America founded purely on the ideals of freedom and equality, or was it, in part, designed according to a blueprint laid down by secret societies whose influence stretched far beyond what the public ever knew? The evidence is subtle, yet it lingers all around us. The architecture of government buildings. The strange symbols embedded in the dollar bill. The private correspondence of leaders who spoke one way in public and another way in secret. These fragments suggest something extraordinary, that the ideals of America may have been shaped not only by Enlightenment philosophy but by the clandestine traditions of brotherhoods that demanded loyalty above all else. And so we're left with the question. What were these societies truly after? Were they simply tools of fellowship and mutual aid? Or were they mechanisms to steer the birth of a nation into directions hidden from ordinary citizens? The Founding Fathers left behind monuments, documents, and institutions we still live under today. But they also left behind symbols, etched into stone, woven into currency, and built into the very foundation of Washington, D.C. Were these just artistic choices? Or secret signatures left by men who wanted the world to know, that America was theirs from the very beginning? To answer that, we must step directly into the world of the Freemasons. If one secret society stands above all others in America's early story, it is the Freemasons. Their name alone carries weight, whispered in documentaries, novels, and even in conspiracy theories that stretch across centuries. But what were they really doing in colonial America? And how did this brotherhood, which traced its symbols back to stonemasons and medieval guilds, become so deeply tied to the men who would build a nation? Freemasonry had its roots in Europe, in traditions that blended craftsmanship with ritual, morality, and secrecy. By the early 1700s, the society had evolved into something far more philosophical than practical. Its lodges attracted not only stonemasons but also thinkers, merchants, and politicians. When Europeans crossed the Atlantic, they brought with them these lodges and their oaths, and soon Masonic halls were springing up in the colonies, from Boston to Charleston. Picture the scene. A candlelit room, windows shuttered, chairs arranged in precise formation. At the center, a square and compass, their meaning known only to those who had taken the solemn oath. A gavel strikes wood, and silence falls. The men gathered there are not simply socializing. They are binding themselves into a fellowship that transcends borders, wealth, and even the authority of kings. Each man swears secrecy, loyalty, and obedience. For outsiders, it is impenetrable. For insiders, it is a key to influence, trust, and opportunity. It is no coincidence that George Washington himself was initiated into a Masonic lodge at just 20 years old. Nor that Benjamin Franklin, one of the sharpest minds of his age, not only joined but became a Grand Master. John Hancock, Paul Revere, and countless others followed the same path. Were they simply attracted to the fraternity as a form of social networking? Or did they see in it something more, a hidden structure through which they could organize, share ideas, and prepare for something greater than anyone could yet imagine? The lodges gave these men a safe space to think boldly. In a colonial world still dominated by Britain, where criticism of the crown could mean imprisonment or worse, secrecy was not just a luxury, it was a necessity. Within the walls of their halls, men spoke freely about liberty, self-rule, and independence, shielded by ritual and sworn silence. Even the symbols of Freemasonry carried a dual meaning. To outsiders, they looked like harmless tools of stonemasons. To insiders, they carried deeper messages. The compass represented moral boundaries. The square stood for truth and fairness. The eye watching over all, the all-seeing eye, reminded them of a higher power to whom they would answer. But when these symbols began appearing in American designs, in architecture, and later even on the dollar bill, the question became unavoidable. Were these the symbols of a free people, or the silent mark of a brotherhood that wanted its hand on the levers of power? Critics, even in the 18th century, were suspicious. Some colonists worried that these lodges were too secretive, too influential. What did it mean if the same men plotting revolution in daylight were swearing loyalty in darkness to a secret fraternity? Were they patriots first, or Masons first? The connection between Masonic lodges and revolutionary activity is too strong to ignore. Many of the earliest committees and gatherings that would spark rebellion took place among men who recognized one another not only as neighbors but as brothers under oath. Even the famed Boston Tea Party appears, under the surface, to have been coordinated by Masons meeting in the same lodges. Was this coincidence, or coordination? And here lies the chilling thought. If a handful of men bound together by secret signs and silent nods could pull off an act that would ignite a revolution, how much more could they do? Could they, in fact, lay down the framework for a whole new nation, embedding their ideals, and their symbols, so deeply that Americans centuries later would unknowingly live within their design? Think of Washington, D.C. itself. Its streets, monuments, and even its city layout contain echoes of Masonic geometry. Some claim you can trace pentagrams and compasses across the map. Is this real, or just the human mind searching for patterns? Either way, it raises a haunting question. Were these symbols left there by accident, or by intention, a silent legacy carved into the nation's capital by men whose brotherhood demanded secrecy. The Freemasons provided more than secrecy. They provided unity. Colonial America was fragmented, by region, by religion, by class. But the lodge was a place where a farmer, a merchant, and a politician could meet as equals, bound not by law but by ritual. This gave the colonies something priceless in their struggle against Britain, a network of trust that stretched across states and cities. Yet this trust came at a cost. Ordinary citizens knew nothing of these meetings, these plans, these symbols. They were excluded, left outside while decisions that would shape their futures were whispered inside shuttered halls. America was a land of freedom, but it was also a land where secrets could determine destiny. The Masons weren't the only brotherhood hiding in America's shadows. While they built lodges and carved symbols into the nation's foundations, other groups emerged, some even darker, cloaked in whispers of mysticism and forbidden knowledge. Could it be that the birth of America was shaped not just by one society, but by a hidden competition between rival secret orders? To answer this, we must look at the rumors of an Illuminati influence in the New World. If the Freemasons represented the respectable face of secret brotherhoods, the Illuminati represented their darker shadow. Born in Bavaria in 1776, the very year America declared independence, the Illuminati quickly became a symbol of hidden power, of elites working in silence to shape societies behind the scenes. But could such a group have reached across the Atlantic to touch the fragile birth of America? And if so, what traces did they leave behind? To understand the panic that swept through the early republic, you have to picture the atmosphere of the late 1700s. The colonies had just broken free from Britain. The Constitution had been signed. Yet uncertainty ruled the land. Would this new nation survive? Would democracy itself hold? In this fragile moment, whispers began to spread. Whispers that an unseen hand was at work. That the young America was not free at all, but already captured by forces more secretive than any king. The Illuminati was founded by Adam Weishaupt, a professor in Germany who believed that rationalism and enlightenment should guide society, not religion or monarchy. To his followers, it was a philosophy of liberation. To his enemies, it was a dangerous cult bent on tearing down tradition, morality, and faith. By the 1790s, European monarchies were pointing to the Illuminati as the hidden spark behind revolutions, rebellions, and uprisings. If they could topple thrones in Europe, what might they do in a fragile democracy across the sea? And here is where America's paranoia began. Sermons thundered from pulpits warning of Illuminati agents slipping quietly into the new nation. Pamphlets circulated accusing politicians of being puppets of this foreign order. Even respected ministers claimed that the revolution itself had been hijacked by Illuminati ideals, that what the patriots believed was their own fight for liberty was in fact a carefully engineered plot by a hidden brotherhood. The name of George Washington himself was dragged into this storm. Letters survive in which citizens asked him directly, was he, too, part of the Illuminati? Washington's response was cautious. He denied that the Illuminati had gained much ground in America. But his words were careful, not absolute. He acknowledged that societies of a similar type had indeed appeared. To some, this was reassurance. To others, it was confirmation that the Brotherhood had already slipped inside. What made the fear so powerful was that the Illuminati, unlike the Freemasons, left almost no trace. No public lodges. No open symbols. If they were there, they would have been invisible, guiding events from the shadows. And in a young America, already alive with suspicion of hidden plots, this was fuel on a fire. The panic of the 1790s became so intense that newspapers openly debated whether the Constitution itself had been designed under Illuminati influence. Were the freedoms it promised, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, actually tools to weaken faith and tradition? Were America's leaders unknowingly, or knowingly, agents of a plan that stretched back to Europe? The fear reached a fever pitch during the election of 1800. Supporters of John Adams accused Thomas Jefferson of being an Illuminati sympathizer, a man who would dismantle Christianity in America. Jefferson's writings on reason and skepticism only added to the suspicion. And yet, Jefferson would win, and his presidency would only deepen the unease of those who believed that unseen hands were pulling the strings of power. Historians now debate how real the threat truly was. Some argue that the Illuminati never had a foothold in America at all, that the entire panic was little more than hysteria imported from Europe. But others point to subtle clues, pamphlets, coded language, and the undeniable overlap between Enlightenment ideals and Illuminati goals. Could it be that the Illuminati did not need to plant agents in America, because their ideas had already crossed the ocean in the minds of thinkers like Franklin, Jefferson, and Paine? And this is where the story twists. For if ideas themselves can act like secret agents, then who truly shaped America? Was it the patriots who carried muskets and signed declarations, or the hidden philosophers who seeded their dreams with the language of revolution? Even today, conspiracy theorists point to the unfinished pyramid and all-seeing eye on the Great Seal of the United States as proof of Illuminati influence. Others argue it is purely Masonic. But to the ordinary citizen of the early republic, such symbols were unsettling. They asked themselves, often in silence, if our nation was built by men who swore loyalty to secret brotherhoods, then whose nation is it, really? The power of the Illuminati panic was not in its facts, but in its questions. Questions that remain alive even now. If a society could operate unseen, if its members could pass as ordinary citizens while serving a hidden agenda, then how could anyone truly know who held power? The whispers of the Illuminati may have been exaggerated, but they left America uneasy. And in that unease, new groups rose, secretive orders born not in Europe, but on American soil itself. These brotherhoods were not content to borrow ideas. They wanted to weave their own mysteries into the fabric of the Republic. To uncover them, we must step into the shadows of Yale University, where the infamous Skull and Bones Society was about to begin its strange and secret rule. By the early 1800s, America's obsession with secret societies had already been fueled by the Freemasons and the Illuminati panic. But something new was about to emerge. Unlike the imported brotherhoods of Europe, these new groups were distinctly American. They were born not in shadowy taverns or underground lodges but in the very heart of America's intellectual and political elite, its universities. And among them, one name would come to dominate the whispers of secrecy and power for nearly 2 centuries, Skull and Bones. The year was 1832. Yale University, one of the most prestigious schools in the country, was already a breeding ground for future leaders. Presidents, senators, judges, and captains of industry walked its halls. But within this culture of privilege, a new society appeared, one that promised not only lifelong brotherhood but also influence that stretched far beyond the ivy-covered walls. Its name alone carried a sense of unease, Skull and Bones. Membership was, and remains, limited to just 15 seniors each year. Chosen in a secret ritual known only as Tap Night, these young men were plucked from their peers and invited into a world few would ever glimpse. To the outside world, they were just students. But once initiated, they became Bones men, bound for life to one another and to the mysterious order they now served. The rituals of Skull and Bones have been the subject of endless speculation. Some say initiates are made to confess their deepest secrets, binding them in loyalty through shared vulnerability. Others describe dark ceremonies in windowless halls, conducted in a building known simply as the Tomb. The very architecture of this headquarters, a fortress-like structure with no windows, guarded fiercely from curious eyes, seems to confirm the society's obsession with secrecy. But why should a student society inspire such fear? The answer lies not in the rituals themselves but in what came after. Skull and Bones alumni have filled some of the most powerful positions in American history. Presidents William Howard Taft, George H. W. Bush, and George W. Bush were all Bones men. Senators, CIA directors, Supreme Court justices, and business tycoons have worn the Bones mark. The sheer reach of its members has led many to believe that Skull and Bones is less a fraternity and more a hidden network guiding the destiny of the United States. Imagine the advantage. At just 21 years old, a student is initiated into a group that guarantees him lifelong access to a network of power in politics, business, media, and intelligence. When such men climb to high office, are they loyal to the public who elected them, or to the secret order that bound them in youth? That question has haunted American democracy for generations. The secrecy surrounding Skull and Bones has only fed the rumors. Whispers of occult practices, bizarre rituals with skulls and coffins, even the theft of the bones of Geronimo by society members, all these stories swirl around the order, never confirmed, never fully denied. Each rumor adds fuel to the idea that Skull and Bones is more than just a club. It is a machine of influence, one that operates invisibly, its gears turning behind the curtain of democracy. And here lies the deeper fear. If America was founded on ideals of openness, freedom, and equality, what does it mean when its leaders gather in locked rooms to swear secret oaths? Does it mean that the very fabric of the republic was stitched together not only by laws and votes but by whispers and hidden hands? Historians and skeptics argue that Skull and Bones is just a social club for the wealthy, a networking tool like many others. But its uncanny ability to produce leaders in key positions cannot be ignored. When both candidates for the presidency in 2004, George W. Bush and John Kerry, were Bones men, the country faced an unsettling truth: no matter which way the people voted, the White House would belong to Skull and Bones. Was that coincidence, or design? The story of Skull and Bones reminds us that secret societies are not always foreign imports. America created its own. They were shaped in the classrooms of Yale, forged in rituals that bound young men together, and unleashed into the halls of power. And while ordinary citizens debated liberty and democracy, these brotherhoods whispered their own oaths in the shadows. The legacy of Skull and Bones is not simply about who wore its ring or entered its tomb. It is about the unsettling possibility that America's greatest decisions, from wars to elections to economic policy, may have been influenced not only in Congress or the White House but in a locked room at Yale where 15 young men swore eternal loyalty to one another. And so, a question emerges. If the leaders of a nation belong to secret orders, then how much of the nation truly belongs to its people? Skull and Bones may be the most infamous of America's secret societies, but it was not alone. Across the 19th century, new brotherhoods sprouted, some political, some religious, and some with agendas still debated today. Among them was one society so powerful, it was accused of igniting an entire political party built on fear of hidden hands. To uncover this next chapter, we must turn to the rise of the anti-Masonic movement, and the strange tale of a man who vanished after threatening to expose too much. By the 1820s, the Freemasons were at the height of their influence in the United States. Lodges stretched from New England to the frontier. Politicians proudly displayed their Masonic rings. Judges, merchants, and ministers met in secret, united by oaths older than the Republic itself. To the average citizen, the Masons seemed untouchable, too powerful, too secretive, too far above accountability. But all of that began to unravel with one man. His name was William Morgan. In 1826, Morgan threatened to publish a book exposing the rituals of the Masons. To him, it was nothing more than a way to make money. To the Masons, it was betrayal. Not long after his announcement, Morgan vanished. He was last seen being dragged away by men tied to local lodges. His body was never found. The disappearance of William Morgan shocked the nation. Newspapers reported the story with outrage. Rumors spread of Masonic conspiracies. Had they murdered him? If so, what did it mean that judges, sheriffs, and lawmakers were Masons themselves? Who could hold them accountable? The case ignited a firestorm of suspicion. Suddenly, the secrecy that once made the Masons alluring now made them terrifying. Citizens whispered that their democracy was being undermined by men who pledged loyalty not to the Constitution, but to each other. And from that fear, something extraordinary was born, America's first third political party, the Anti-Masonic Party. The party's platform was simple: to expose and oppose the hidden influence of secret societies. Campaign rallies thundered with warnings of Masonic corruption. Newspapers printed scathing accusations. For a time, the anti-Masons won elections and sent representatives to Congress. The movement proved that ordinary Americans were not only aware of secret societies, but willing to fight back against them. Yet, even as the anti-Masonic movement rose, secret societies continued to evolve. While the Masons faced backlash, new groups like Skull and Bones at Yale tightened their secrecy. Others went underground, operating in ways harder to detect. The irony was clear: the more Americans tried to expose hidden networks, the more those networks adapted to the shadows. This cycle, of revelation, suspicion, and deeper secrecy, has never really ended. In the 20th century, fears shifted toward groups like the Illuminati, the Council on Foreign Relations, and shadowy cabals said to control banks, wars, and presidents. Whether rooted in fact or fiction, the paranoia endured. Why? Because Americans have always wrestled with a contradiction. The nation was founded on ideals of openness, democracy, and the will of the people. Yet at every turn, whispers of secret power, brotherhoods, societies, hidden lodges, have haunted that dream. Were these groups merely social clubs? Or were they the invisible architects of the Republic? Consider this. When two presidential candidates in 2004, George W. Bush and John Kerry, were both members of Skull and Bones, what were Americans really choosing? Two men. Or two faces of the same hidden order? And think back to William Morgan. His fate remains unsolved, a ghostly reminder of what happens to those who pull too hard at the threads of secrecy. Did he die because he revealed too much? Or did his disappearance become the convenient myth that allowed paranoia to flourish? Perhaps that is the true power of secret societies. They do not need to control every law or every leader. They only need to exist just far enough in the shadows that we cannot see their full shape. In that uncertainty, suspicion thrives. As we close this journey into America's hidden history, one question lingers: how much of our democracy is shaped not in ballots and public speeches, but in whispers behind locked doors? If you found this story unsettling, ask yourself, what other secrets lie buried in the foundations of our history? Could the very freedoms we cherish be intertwined with loyalties sworn in candlelit halls? Let us know what you think. Do secret societies truly steer the course of nations, or are they just convenient scapegoats for the mysteries of power? Drop your theory in the comments. Share this with a friend who loves unraveling history's shadows. And if you want to dive even deeper into the secrets and mysteries that shaped our world, don't forget to subscribe. Because the past isn't dead. It's waiting. Hidden. And in every whisper of history, a secret still calls out to be heard.